We begin this hour with President Trump's cronies doing his bidding, because that's the day that ends in Y, whether it's pursuing retribution or seemingly protecting him from a new scandal. And now he has another loyal foot soldier confirmed to a very powerful position. Last night, the Senate voted to confirm Jeanine Pirro, a former Fox News host who has defended Trump for years as U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C. That news came after we learned of Trump's latest target, the man who investigated him for his role in the January 6th insurrection and for mishandling classified documents, former special counsel Jack Smith. Now, the U.S. Office of Special Counsel, which is supposed to be an independent federal agency, has launched an investigation into Smith over an alleged violation of the Hatch Act. It's a law that bars certain political activities by government officials. The investigation came at the behest of Republican Senator Tom Cotton, who requested that the OSC look into Smith for, quote, unprecedented interference in the 2024 election. Terrible interference because Donald Trump won. Neither Trump nor his Republican allies have provided any evidence of wrongdoing. Meanwhile, the DOJ appears to be working hard to protect and insulate Trump, including from the recent backlash he's received for his handling of the Epstein files. Jeffrey Epstein's accomplice and convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell was transferred from a low-security prison in Florida to a minimum-security prison camp in Texas. Just a little over a week after her two-day meeting with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. Yes, that is the same Todd Blanche who was Trump's personal attorney. Joining us now to break it all down, Andrew Weissmann, an MSNBC legal analyst, former FBI general counsel, and former senior member of the Mueller probe. Andrew, thanks for joining us. I just want to start with the Blanche and Maxwell of it all, right? Because we've continued to talk about this, but it bears repeating because at this point, she's in Club Fed, right, hanging out. Talk a little bit about that's Neil Katyal. Hey, Neil. We will get Andrew back here in a second. But Andrew, when you're looking at her getting this kind of cushier prison camp situation, that would seem to smack of preferential treatment, which usually prosecutors try not to do, even with people who are there that are working with them.
Well, it doesn't just seem to be preferential treatment. It is preferential treatment. Ghislaine Maxwell was and is not qualified under the BOP, the Bureau of Prisons regulations, to be in that level of security prison. No one else is accorded that privilege. It is because of the nature of what she was convicted of. Remember, she is convicted of being a child sex trafficker and has received a 20-year sentence. So both the nature of what she did and the length of sentence means that she shouldn't be in essentially what's called a camp, a sort of low level, the lowest level of security. There had to have been a waiver for that to happen. And you have to ask yourself, one, why? Why was that being given to her? What is the payoff for? Why would you accord somebody with that kind of prison record preferential treatment? This is something that the Trump administration did, certainly in Trump 1.0. I remember that when the Paul Manafort case was being brought, where he was given preferential treatment. And two, it should offend anyone in a bipartisan way that you shouldn't be treated better because you are a friend of the president and worse because you are viewed as an enemy of the president. And so I think for both reasons, this is really a disgrace in terms of our justice system.
Andrew, I'd like to jump in here. You know, Tom Cotton, Senator Cotton's like, hey, we want to do this investigation into Jack Smith. You know, we have concerns about how he conducted his job before. It's not like Jack Smith volunteered, right? He was asked to go do these investigations. And some of this to me is almost like an arsonist saying, I want to investigate the firemen for thwarting my plans. Talk a little bit about how ridiculous it is that Republicans who voted against Trump's impeachment, who did everything in their power to keep him from being held accountable, are now going after the people who, through no fault of their own, were simply assigned to investigate this man.
Sure. Well, again, I can sort of relate this to my personal experience when I worked on the Mueller investigation. We were very aware that they were going to investigate the investigators, and there was going to be that oversight. So I'm not surprised by this. Two, it's worth remembering that the alleged violations or the investigation is about the Hatch Act, which is a civil statute, not a criminal statute. I highly doubt that there's going to be any more merit to this investigation than there was in connection with the Mueller investigation. Remember, John Durham investigated all of that and found nothing. And I think the same thing will be true here. You know, Jack Smith is extremely reputable, had a reputable career team. And finally, it's worth noting that this sort of claim of sort of selective investigation or selective prosecution, those claims were made in the Trump cases that were brought, in the criminal cases that were brought, and every judge that actually reached the merits of it rejected it. So this, to me, is something that seems like a distraction. And finally, if there were actually to be a case that was brought, if they were actually to bring a case, this is the last thing that you would think the Trump administration and Trump himself would want. He spent years trying to avoid, and largely being successful, avoiding any of these cases going to trial. And if he's going to have a trial here, that's going to be a forum for Jack Smith and people to put on the evidence that he has tried for so long to avoid.
Andrew, I think you're absolutely right that he's trying to change the page. If you recall, last week it was all about going after Beyonce and Oprah. This week it's about Jack Smith, trying to figure out what is sticking. But I think that there lies a deeper, more nefarious concern I think the American people should have, and that is the weaponization of Department of Justice, of employees just simply doing their jobs. I can't imagine what the morale is right now at the Department of Justice, but speak to the dangers of the weaponization of someone who should be fair arbiters for every single American, regardless of who's in office.
Absolutely. And there you have such a bastardization of language where you have the current administration saying, oh, we're trying to fight weaponization, when that is actually what they're doing. And, you know, this is where this is my mantra to people, which is facts matter. And you can actually look at the facts. And if there's weaponization on either side, it should be deplored and shouldn't go on. But here, the facts are there simply is no reason to think that the Biden administration was engaged in weaponization. After all, they prosecuted numerous Democrats, including the president's own son. And so it's really beyond the pale to see that happening here. And in terms of what's happening in the Department of Justice, the other thing that is just deeply, deeply hypocritical is this claim that, you know, during the Biden administration, they didn't tolerate any sort of dissent, that they only wanted to track against certain people and they wouldn't brook any sort of honest discussion. That is the exact opposite of what is happening now, where people are being fired simply for raising issues and actually going to court and being unwilling to lie to the court and say things that are not true. For instance, the whistleblower who refused to say that Mr. Abrego Garcia is a terrorist and then ended up being fired. So this apples and oranges is really insidious. And in terms of it's really awful what's happening in the department. You want pushback. You want a honest discussion. You want people to be raising questions. When I was there, I welcomed, and I should have welcomed, people to say, I think you're making a mistake, and I think there are other ways to look at it. That's what I think every American would want in any organization, let alone one as powerful as the Department of Justice.
Our friend Barbara McQuaid, MSNBC legal analyst, everyone here knows and loves her. This is what she tweeted yesterday about the Jack Smith investigation. I'm curious if you agree with this. The only weaponization involving Jack Smith is this investigation. This is worse than the Red Scare. The only weaponization involving Jack Smith is this investigation. Do you agree with her on this being worse than the Red Scare? How concerned should people watching be about this? It's a canary in the coal mine?
Yeah, I mean, I think people should be. I think that there are so many other things. This is one of them. I do think it is fair to ask the question of any prosecutor, whether they have been fair, whether they have treated people the same as anyone else. It's highly rich that it would come from this administration that they're doing that. But I think it's fair to have an inquiry into making sure that everybody has acted above board, but not in the way it's being done here. I think there are just so many other examples of the Red Scare where we are going through sort of the 1950s McCarthyism, but on steroids. I think that you can see what's happening in universities, in law firms, in businesses. Basically, it's anybody who is going to stand up to this administration. You see it in the courts where they're filing complaints against judges and seeking their impeachment. And there's been numerous threats of violence against judges simply, these, by the way, judges appointed by Republicans and Democrats, simply because they rule against the unconstitutionality of what the Trump administration is doing. So I think those are sort of equally or more illustrative of what Barb was getting at there.